hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Terrific. I think the Blue Ridge section is providing a great value to membership with these webinars, and want to thank them, and particularly Norval. This takes a lot of his time to take care of all the nitty-gritty logistics and details to get this through to you. I provided this sandwich chart just as a notes page for you. What I'd like each of you to do is think about some type of instruction that you are responsible for or that you participate in that is just deadly dull. And by deadly dull, I mean you see no hope for finding a way to engage the learners with this instruction. Think of something specific for you so that as we go through each of the 4 aspects of this model, A, R, C, S, that you're able to note maybe creative ideas that come to you or questions that you have. As we go through the presentation, I'll stop after each of the elements to look for questions that you might have in the chat window, and then at the end we'll open it up for general questions. This is a Prezi format presentation. And I'm using John Keller's ARCS model. It's got a lot of research behind it. ARCSmodel.com provides you with resources. I'll cover that later. So this is the feeling. The feeling is that there are learners that are already saturated. They already have a lot on their plate. They've already attended a lot of other training sessions, and the topic may not be inspiring to them. You are in a difficult predicament of trying to drive them toward the water when they are not thirsty. In fact, it's impossible, right? It feels impossible. Hopefully we'll find a way out of this scenario. So John Keller is the Yoda of learning motivation, and he's developed a system so that you can implement aspects of this. And he's saying, oh, thirsty you are, and through this mind manipulation, all of the learners become thirsty. All right, so A is for attention. This is the first aspect. Obviously, it's a sensory thing, right? So perceptual arousal. You want to make sure. I kind of missed. Let me try that again. Okay, hopefully you heard a scream. Appeal to the senses. That's your sense of humor is one that you don't often think of. It's not appropriate in every scenario. In this scenario here, I'm not presenting a formal report to the FDA. I'm speaking to people who are eating lunch at their desk, people who are in a maybe trying to keep up some notes for their next meeting, checking in on Facebook. You all may be multitasking. I want to capture your attention, and so humor is appropriate in this scenario. Another perceptual is attention grabber is incongruity or conflict. So I pointed that out for this particular topic. It's trying to get a learner who is not motivated interested. So I used an analogy. Visuals are great. You may have other methods. And concreteness. I provided something that you can take notes on, just involving more senses. If you're in person, if you're face-to-face, it's great because you can have some props. There are other ways of interacting that make it feel more real. Another method for attention is inquiry arousal. If you're face-to-face, ask a lot of questions. Ask questions the whole time that you're giving presentations. You don't need to engage them for participation with martial arts experts battling it out, but some controversy definitely helps because the controversy exists, and acknowledging that there is controversy in the topic that you are instructing will engage the learner. Variability. So there is nothing wrong with templates. Templates are not evil. PowerPoint templates have a bad reputation sometimes, but it's unnecessary. The templates, this is a template for a Prezi. It incorporates a lot of variability in the formats, and you can do that. Some ideas for variability in format are videos, maybe bring your own device, doing things on mobile phones, incorporating collaboration, interaction between the people that are in the course. If you can do demonstrations or have people participate hands-on with what's going on. Music. There are any number of ways, and so this is where you need to be creative and bring in some other ways of interacting that are not simply text on a screen that's read. I'll look in the chat window now for any comments people might have about aha moments where attention has been important, or questions that you might have about gaining the attention initially. All right, will you all be ready? And you'll know that I'm going to do this for each aspect, so welcome you to join in on the chat. I don't see any, so we're going to go on to the next letter. That was the A in ARCS. The next letter is R for relevance. I'm showing a meme here. The meme is, yeah, if you could generate a bunch of reports that no one is going to look at or act upon, that would be great. This happens with instruction all the time. People do not see how the instruction is going to be related to something that is going to be used and valued. We have some ways to get around that to improve the relevance. First order is goal orientation. If you can match the topics to something that people need, obviously they're going to pay attention. Help me now. You know, I need to be able to do this yesterday. People will be tuned in to learn under those circumstances. Another great one is prepare me. Help me feel that I'm going to be able to do something after this that's going to put me ahead of a curve, that's going to prepare me for something that I don't feel prepared for now. I want to be in charge of my own destiny. I don't want to be limited by not having this information. So the goal would be to add that aspect and to point it out in the training. So you need to get into the mind of the learner. You need to match their motive. Yeah. It may be that your learner is interested from far away. I just want an overall view to have some kind of a general idea of something. Well, okay, you know, that's one way of looking at it. You may have somebody who really wants to explore and take off with a topic. That's another motive, you know, further exploration. You may have someone who is there not at all for the topic. They're there for who else is there. They're there for being able to network related to the topic. Make sure in that case that there are some breaks maybe for that, or group work, or exchange of your introduction of who is in the class and what they're interested in. Those types of activities will match those motives. Some of the people may be there because they are interested in recognition. It may be a certification that they can gain. It may be that they need this skill to get toward some type of an award or a level or a promotion. That kind of recognition is important. And obviously the motivation of money is important, right? If you can advance the career, you want to bring that out in your training, that you'll be able to have skills that are going to advance the career, which could lead to more money. Honestly, you have people attending who are not that interested, but if they see the potential of being able to finish their job on time for once and get the heck out of there, then that's motivation too. Bring that out. Give them choices. You may not know the motives of your audience. Some of these are going to resonate, though. We had already talked about variability, variation, different formats, even surprise. So it may seem incongruous that I bring up familiarity. Having familiar touch points in the training, though, does add to attention. You need to appeal to their experience. If the instruction does not feel real, does not match the experience that they've had, then there's an issue with credibility. So appeal to their experience. Maybe you can provide a role model. Often the role model is you. If you are a credible subject matter expert, then make sure they know that. If you are not known as a subject matter expert, but you're delivering the training, reference the subject matter experts that you used. Make sure that you can bring in the subject matter experts, the opinion leaders, the people that these people respect. If they can participate in the training, that's the best. If they can't, then at least let the people know that this person that they respect was involved in the materials. I've got an example here. Sometimes before training, the talk in the hallway is not so positive. I've got to go to training. Sometimes, though, you can have positive discussions in the hallway. Did you hear Destiny is one of the trainers? She is awesome at this. Plus, she tells it like it is. So having people that have generated some credibility can provide a very positive attitude in the learners. I'm looking in the chat window for any comments you might have on the topic of relevance. Aha moments maybe with your specific ideas that you had or questions that you might have on capturing relevance. All right. Move on to C for competence. This is the third aspect, and in my mind, this is the one that's gained the most respect from me through the past couple of years for attention from the instructor. If you look at this chart, you'll notice that there's an x-axis, that level of competence, and that's of the learner. If the learner is a beginner in the topic, then they have low competence, and if they're a subject matter expert, then they have high competence. Then the y-axis is the level of challenge. So if you have a low level of challenge in the instruction, that might be like a read and sign on a procedure. Then that is the lower side of it. And on the high side of it might be that they need to be able to perform some kind of complex and critical operation. So if you are addressing people that are beginners and they see material that looks tremendously difficult, they shut down due to anxiety. They realize that they cannot achieve the level of competence that is required. On the other hand, if you present SMEs with remedial material of low challenge, they're going to tune out too, out of boredom. You're looking for that balance between what the learner can achieve with assistance, and that's the zone of proximal development. That's your optimum place to be as an instructor, keeping your learners in that point. And what we're looking at is the learner having the confidence that between the skills, experience, and attitudes that that learner has, that they have the resources. The resources are the instructor and any other materials that are helpful. It may be a mentor, it may be on-the-job training, it may be a performance support system, but between where they are and what they are getting access to through the training, they need to be confident that they can reach those goals that we talked about before, that they can become successful. And the more difficult it is, then the more chances you must provide for them to experience success along the way so that they can be step by step moving along and gaining confidence. And where I see this as most critical is where you may have a safety critical operation. And the very first time that the operators are running it, there can be no mistakes. If they do not feel confident, they do not belong on the process. The training must address all the aspects to the most extent where they're very confident that they know how to handle the situation and they know how to handle anything that would come up. So, and that's certainly the case in pharmaceutical manufacturing where you're implementing some critical operations, but it may apply to some other industries as well. One thing I like to say about confidence is that you can think about your instruction and you can think about whether that type of instruction tends toward being in the upper level of anxiety where there's too much challenge or in the lower zone of boredom where there's too little challenge. And I suspect that in a lot of compliance-driven training, a lot of quality-driven training even, that you're meeting regulations and the tendency is to err on boredom, to err on low challenge. And so you can find ways to incorporate higher challenge to build that confidence. And I'm looking for any kind of comments then in the chat window to talk about confidence. All right. The final one, ARCS. Satisfaction. You know the smile sheets that you get after you've gone through training, and that is an evaluation. And you'll get one after this, and I really request that you do fill out the survey because I need to hear from you. But it goes beyond just that you feel like you didn't waste that hour. Satisfaction hits at the heart of the learner. You want the learner to feel like they value themselves more with this instruction than prior to the instruction, that they care about, it's their value system, that they care about what they've learned. Another aspect of satisfaction is recognition, getting those continuing credits, getting a badge, getting some manner of acknowledging that they were valued. And the final point here is last but not least. You want everyone that is participating in the training to feel that the training is fair, that the individuals are respected, that they've been able to participate and be respected when they've had questions or for information that they've brought forward to discuss. So if they have gotten everything else out of the training but they don't feel that is the case, then they won't be satisfied. If they do feel that's the case, then they will feel satisfied. If they don't feel satisfied, then that's what they're going to remember out of the training. So, so any kind of questions in the chat window or aha moments for satisfaction? Alan has confidence. Okay, great. So far, so good. Appreciate that. All right, excellent. Okay, this was the last aspect of the ARCS model, and you can notice that there are a lot of overlapping concepts, and I think the thing that Keller did was break it out so that you have a systematic way to think about it, but you can see that they're all interlinked. So at this time, I'd like to open this up for you to share any type of example that you have of difficult training. And if you have any questions for me for ideas or for the group for ideas, or if you've found ideas on your own, I'd like to have those now.
Okay, Vicki, this is Norval. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to unmute everybody's lines so that way if they do have questions, rather than wait for them to type into the chat box, we'll go ahead and let them ask their questions directly to you. So hold on
Thank
just
you,
a moment
Norval.
here. Okay, so I've unmuted everybody, so if anybody has questions, please go ahead. We'll try to take turns here, hopefully.
I'd like to know, did people resonate with that concept of having issues with having engaged learners that are listening? Is there any advice for online trainings? Yes, definitely. Well, there are different types of online trainings, and yeah, all these concepts do apply. I teach online for Purdue University in their Graduate School of Learning, Design, and Technology, and this is the primary model that we use. There's certainly the ability to grab attention. I think the difficult part is instructor immediacy, and it's great if you can have discussion forums. If you have maybe SharePoint sites or some way, even, hey, if it's an informal situation, Facebook groups, you know, you can set one of those up, a way for people to interact. Then that can provide a few more, that can make up for some of the difficulties of online training and holding attention. On the other hand, I would say that online you actually have some advantages too. It's not all disadvantages. So choosing the right medium for the content is important. For example, if you have learners who are introverted, and you certainly do, are they going to speak up and ask questions in a face-to-face setting where a lot of people are present? Possibly they may be reluctant to do that. However, if they're operating in a discussion forum where they have some time to process the material and come up with information, then post it. That can be great. That can be a big bonus because you'll get the input from people who have deep thoughts but are reluctant to express it. So yeah, I found online to work very well for many types of training. This started out as a face-to-face presentation, and I'm giving it here as a webinar. I think the drawback was I could not be reading your body language or asking people directly when I see that they're, that they have a question. So that makes that aspect of it more difficult. But it still works for an online format.
Hey, Vicki, I have a small group here with me in Stanton that have questions. You want to go ahead and ask her?
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Vicki. This is Lisa. I work with Norval.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you for bringing up your questions.
Sure. Here at Cadence, I teach new hire training for introduction to quality and good documentation practices. And I've found it difficult to really get people interested because, number one, with them being new hires, I usually get them on their second day here where they've only actually been out on the floor looking at what they're going to be doing for probably maybe 4 or 6 hours total. Mm-hmm. So they're really not familiar with anything when I go over, the quality pyramid and procedures and work instructions. Some people have had prior manufacturing experience where they've been a part of that, but for the most part not. So I was wondering if you had any kind of recommendations on some things that I could throw into my training to kind of get a little bit of interest.
Sure. Yeah, I've also taught good documentation practices for pharmaceuticals, so I understand the issue that you can come up with. I would recommend, do you have a large group or just a few people at a time?
It could vary from 1 and up.
Okay. Well, if you have a group, then posing a competition can help. having an online, or not online, but having a face-to-face group where they need to come up with some corrections to some examples that kind of show the specific faults with, you know, the things that can happen through poor documentation, the confusion that can ensue.
Right.
So either some kind of competition or some kind of role play, speculation, showing, you know, maybe even bringing in some humorous aspects. You know, certain things are just forbidden, and they need to know that from their very first day. So I understand the frustration that you have that they're new hires. On the other hand, when they're new hires, you don't want them to, you know, pull a bottle of whiteout fluid from their purse and start, you know, white out their name where they didn't do it quite right, where they want to spell, you know, where they want to do it better, or, you know, so. You know, the things that are particularly important to offset, to prevent them doing something disastrous on the first day, that's what you want to be emphasizing, and you can do that through demonstrations or involving them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions about that, or about anything? More questions from Cadence?
The one thing that always everybody struggles with is, I call it, a lot of times we do, this is Nick at Cadence, is on the relevance side of it. A lot of times we try to do training and broad spectrum training for multidiscipline type of careers. And the example is if you're trying to teach regulations and good documentation practices and so forth, and you have the salespeople involved with it, it's like trying to herd cats and trying to get them to focus. And, you know, sort of that band of zone of your proper focus on that kind of group tends to be such a, almost like a knife edge, no pun intended for us here, to try to keep them focused, because they're worrying about, you know, what time's their tea time and what time they're, you know, they got to get their whatever. And so it's just there are certain groups that really have struggled with that. I don't want to call relevance, but probably is relevance, because nothing seems to really matter to them. They sort of have their own, they march to their own tune, and I'm involved with it stuff that tends to end up being frustrating for the trainer, because they sit there and they're on their phones and their computers and checking this and checking that, and they just can't keep the focus, almost like an ADD. So if there's some suggestions for certain, what I call difficult learners, you give us some of those, because whenever you have to deal with it, yeah, or uninterested, that would be helpful.
Oh, the poor salespeople, right? We talk about them worrying about their tea times, and then we just love it though when they make the sales, right? So we all keep our jobs. So yeah, it's a knife edge. You want them to be gregarious. You want them to be influential, but you also want them to do that within the confines of the regulations which you're required to uphold. And I have seen times when sales or marketing have done things that were so clearly an affront to regulations, and the company pays for that, right? So I think, you know, and if they can get by with it, they're the heroes. But when you pay for it, it's a major obstacle if you actually are called out on it by your regulatory agency for improper marketing or sales tactics. So I think that might be where to bring in the relevance, is establishing the culture of it mattering. The person that those salespeople report to, that may be a place to go to for what I was saying about bringing in a subject matter expert or an opinion leader. You need to know that that person is going to support the concepts of good of following the regulations. If that person doesn't, then they're right to ignore you. honestly, they're going to make more money and they're not going to be, so you really need that relationship with the upper management of those salespeople. Another idea would be certainly to bring in case studies. Case studies where something has gone wrong to show that this is real, and hopefully case studies that are relevant to them, that they're going to understand. So the herding cats part, yeah, they're interested in networking, certainly. I'm not sure how, but you need to incorporate that. That is a part of who they are. That is what your learner is motivated by, and maybe having them do some kind of an activity. You need to keep them busy. Some kind of an activity where they need to present, which they like to do, results of a group. Maybe they come up with the case studies. That might be an option, so that they're saying it's important. So there are a few ideas.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. It's always a difficult task to to try to come up with ideas on your own when you're in the muck.
Yeah, I think another issue is with regulatory topics like this, you want to have a paper record. And so, Nick, you hadn't brought this up, but how do you demonstrate to the regulator that you did provide this information to the sales team? That is something that you need to make sure you're considering within your learning management system or whatever system you're using to track these. For example, I do not have a transcript for this presentation. It's an informal presentation. For something that's for a regulatory agency, you may want to have more than simply that they spent 2 hours in a webinar or 2 hours in a face-to-face meeting. You may want to provide the results. If they provided information on case studies, have some kind of demonstration that they've signed off on it, and that that they've actually been quasi-certified, certainly qualified on this material. In other words, cover yourself so that you've got documentation that they were trained, because they may not remember later.
What's your thoughts on doing verification of training? In other words, doing sometimes people, I've done training where I've thrown in a little quiz at the end to make sure the key points were understood. Give me your thoughts on doing that as a aid or a confirmation that the training was effective.
Yeah, I think the evaluation is important. The learner assessment itself, often for regulatory environments, the rule for some companies, the procedure for some companies require that people pass with 100%. That might be at odds with the idea of providing a level of challenge. So what I would recommend there is that you have some formative assessments, in other words, some assessments that don't count toward the final, that really are challenging. Some throughout the training, you are presenting some more difficult concepts that you ask questions that you have not already provided the answers to. If they already know all the answers, then maybe you can have a pretest and have them out of there. But you want to be providing some indication that this is the material you are going to need to pay attention to because you don't know it, and that's pretty effective. So I think in addition to the quiz at the end, which is often made intentionally remedial, that you have some challenge along the way. Then walking out of the training, say days later. I actually heard this from someone that's real active within ATD. 15% of what they learned they will remember. So that's discouraging, right? All this focus on training, and then, well, what they will remember, though, is if you have provided a performance support system. Also, if you have, something that they can check in real time when they need the material, that's effective. Also, if you can check later on, if it's an important topic, don't just ask the learner whether the training was useful. Ask who the learner works with or who the learner works for, how those learners have progressed. If it's a really important issue for qualification, then they need to have some on-the-job check-off by somebody who's already certified to really know that that they've internalized the material and that it's retained. But checking with the, I have seen a lot of kinds of topics that are compliance related where you could get a baseline and then you could check after training. For example, you could get a baseline on whether people put on the proper protective equipment as they enter a facility, and just have that as a metric, and then afterwards check, was that effective or not? And if it wasn't, then you need to do something additional. So I guess to go back to what I was saying, having formative assessments that don't count for pass-fail, that are difficult, that can't easily be passed, and then having some follow-up afterwards to make sure that it works, an effectiveness check, so to speak.
Okay.
All right. That was a really good question. There's a whole, I have a, last semester I was leading a class on strategic assessments and evaluations, and we got into that. There is a textbook that's really excellent for this called, well, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but the authors are Schrock, S-C-H-R-O-C-K, and Coscarelli. So that's a, and if you can email me later at VGOSSEN, Viki Gossen at Purdue.edu, and I can send you that citation that might be helpful for this. Okay, great question. Anything else? Anything that people have had some ideas on from their training that they were thinking about, that they've come to some creative ideas during this presentation? Welcome back, TJ. All right, well, I welcome anyone that has questions later. One thing I might bring up is the this arcsmodel.com is where you go for all kinds of resources from John Keller's ARCS model. And also, you're certainly welcome to contact me, vgossen at purdue.com or purdue.edu, and I'll get back to you for whatever you might want to discuss. All right, Norval, did you have anything you wanted to talk about for the wrap-up?
Unless somebody has another question, we're going to go ahead and get things closed out. As mentioned earlier, the next lunch webinar for this month is Thursday, December 15th, which is next week. It is on A3 Thinking. It's being presented by Wilbert Owens, who is an associate instructor for the Apex Apple Valley chapter in the Winchester, Virginia area. So if you're interested in that, I know several of you who are online today have also registered for that one. Please join us for it next week. If there isn't anything else, then we're going to go ahead and call it a day, and we'll look forward to seeing most of you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Norval. Goodbye.
Thanks, Vicki.